everybody, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to our monthly live stream with Aware Meditation. We hope you're having a beautiful afternoon. We're going to wait for a few people to come in. But as always, if you are new, my name is Paula Jane Newman. I am the founder of Aware Meditation Inc. And I'm having a technical problem right now. I'm just making sure that those of you who are in the chat get seen. So I see a couple of you are there. Why don't you pop in that you're there and let us know who you are? Those of you who are new, a Vedic meditation is a technique designed for busy people to be able to practice 20 minutes twice a day in a very comfortable position. If you've never heard of the practice at all, we highly suggest that you go to, you see the little picture here, Vedic Meditation Stories. We're going to put that description there in the description box of where you can get it. Currently, it is available on Amazon for free if you have Amazon Unlimited Kindle, and you can get to read stories from individuals who learn the practice. And those stories are not edited. Much to some people's chagrin, it is so that we can hear the authentic voice of the individuals that are in the book, and you can feel how they actually had their lives transformed as a result of learning the practice. Today we have a very special guest. I'm going to bring him in, and then we're going to go into doing some meditation. He is a Vedic meditation teacher. He travels all over the world, but he is specifically here because he just got down and dirty with Vedic Astrology. And I have attended one of his classes. I'm finishing that up. And actually tonight, I'm going to be working with a colleague looking at charts. And he has given us his wonderful time to talk a little bit about how Vedic Astrology is different. And does it work in alignment for being a Vedic meditator? Anyhow, let's bring in Theo Burkhart.
Hello.
Hi, Jay Gurudev.
Hey, Gurudev. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Excellent.
Great. We want to just say hi to Debbie and Dana, who are here already, and they've just said hello in the chat. Thank you for that. So before we do our group meditation, as people are beginning to join in, I'd like to find out a little bit about why you chose to learn Vedic meditation.
Well, I had always been interested in meditation, and in 2001 I was bit by a tick and got Lyme disease, and I started going downhill very fast, and it was undiagnosed, so it was at the time a mystery illness. And though I was on some pretty hardcore medication, I was looking for other modalities as well, and I got really into meditation, but only into the research of it. And I was doing mindfulness meditations, all sorts of stuff, and none of it worked for me. I found every form of meditation that I was doing to be either very difficult and with no benefits. But I was devoted because I was dying. So I stuck with these things that didn't work just because I needed some kind of, I needed something to help. And then finally I quit the whole thing and just thought meditation was a big lie and that no one could actually do it. And then I told this story that I just told to you now to somebody who had just learned, and she convinced me to meet my now teacher, and it just worked like gangbusters. I had insomnia for 9 years, and that ended the day I was initiated, and that really caught my attention. So I decided to stay with it, and things got better and better. And then after a few years, I thought this is what the world needs. And I switched careers, and now I teach it.
And how is your Lyme disease?
Oh, it's gone. It was cured a long time ago. But it left an impression. And after I was, the sickest I ever felt was the day that I was told that I was cured. Because it leaves a lot of toxins in you. I was fatigued. I had a lot of, damaged cells. There was just a lot. It's like if you get hit by a car, 10 minutes later, you're not getting hit by a car anymore, but you're pretty messed up. And so they killed all the spirochetes, which is the bacteria in the body. But I was very toxic, sluggish. I had brain fog. I was, it was pretty nasty. And the meditation helped with cognitive function. It helped bring some of my vitality back. And so I'm not worried about the Lyme disease anymore. It's just one of those. It was really just a catalyst to turn me into a meditation teacher. I think that was its real purpose. It was just kicking me out of one direction of life and course correcting me onto this much greater path.
Did you notice results from the meditation straight away within the first day or so?
Oh, well, yeah, I had insomnia for 9 years. I was initiated in the afternoon. And for 9 years, if I wanted to sleep, I either had to take an Ambien or drink like 10 beers or something.
Sometimes together?
Sometimes together if I really wanted to have fun. And the day I learned, I went home and I was getting into bed reaching for the Ambien, and I just had this sense that I didn't need it. And I got into bed and fell asleep so quickly, and I woke up 10 hours later in the same position I woke up in. And that I hadn't had that experience in 9 years because I had such bad insomnia from the Lyme disease. So that got my attention. And that alone is why I stuck with it in the beginning. And I was a twice a day meditator from that moment, because I thought if all it ever does is give me my sleep back, then I'm doing this for the rest of my life. And then, of course, as you know, that's the least of what it did for me. Those major shifts started to happen after a couple months, the cumulative benefits, from first month or 3 months in, 6 months in. And I just got very curious of what the version of me looked like if I continued to do this after a year or 5 years or 10 years. I wanted to know who that person is. Like, what's the version of Teo if he meditates twice a day for 10 years? That's what I tell my students too. Get very interested in who that person is. Because so many people, as you know, they'll learn and then they kind of go down to once a day, and that's fine. But twice a day really revolutionizes everything, and it did for me.
That's a dramatic shift, and I too had a very similar experience. I had tried lots of meditation practices, and this was the last house on the block, as people say. Yeah. I was so convinced it wouldn't work. I followed the woman's instructions.
That's hilarious. I'm glad you did.
Just to prove that it wouldn't work.
Right.
And I too was quite poorly, as we say, when I came to meditation. I couldn't sleep at night from chronic pain, and I would sleep 3 hours every afternoon. And the first day I came home, was told to try it out myself. And I had so many thoughts. I mean, I suffer from what I call nowadays systemic meditationism, the idea of what I think meditation is supposed to be, right? And as a teacher, my job is to unwind that pattern that people have developed in their brain. And I sat there, I had all these thoughts. I'm still looking right now at the clock. I will never want to give this clock up, because it has such a memory for me of when I tried to meditate for that first day, and opening my eye, closing my, I was a spasming because I kept checking the time because it was so long and so many thoughts. And at the end of the meditation was when I thought if I could have a beer now, it would be great, because that was just painful. I could be drunk and meditating. That seems just much more fun. And after about 5 minutes of lying down, it was clear my body didn't need to go to sleep. It didn't need those 3 hours in the afternoon, and it's never needed it since. And I started to have a regular meditation practice. So with that, we're all going to do a little meditation now. Those of you who have joined us, who are Vedic meditators, you know what to do. Those of you who are checking this video out and have no idea what we do, it's actually the opposite of everything you think meditation is. So if you're getting prepared to be in a really uncomfortable position and cross your legs and strain, then I'm going to give you 20 minutes of a break. We actually sit very comfortably with our eyes closed. Now, we have been over a course and learned how to implement a mantra, but I'm going to suggest you guys simply close your eyes and allow your mind to go wherever it's going to go. Give yourself the opportunity to daydream with your eyes closed. and just see how you feel at the end of the 20 minutes. I'm going to pop it in the chat, the timestamp that we start, so everyone who joins us will know, oh, they just started meditating. And at the end of the meditation, we'll have a couple of minutes to come back and we'll get into talking with Teo about Vedic astrology. All right, so let's close our eyes and I'm going to type in time start, and it is 3:10 here. And we are meditating, and we're going to keep Teo and myself on camera just for your viewing pleasure while we meditate, so you know that there are some other people on the line, but I'm going to take myself on mute. All right, so I'm going to tell everyone, please don't try to meditate. Don't try to do anything. Let's spend the next 20 minutes moving away from a human doing and settling down to the finer levels of feeling a human being all over again. All right, let's begin. And those of you that practice Vedic meditation, we're now going to spend a couple of minutes without our mantra, and I'll let you know when we're going to all slowly open our eyes. Those of you who don't practice it, just spend a couple of minutes bringing our bodies back very gently. Jai Gurudev. And slowly open your eyes. Those of you who've been with us, I always talk about stretching the arms up. Oh, it's very beneficial because it stretches the rib cage. And when we meditate, our breathing gets shallower. Yes, it happens to everyone, not just you. And so if we do a little bit of stretching at the end, it brings our body back just that little bit more smoother in the transition and helps us be more rejuvenated into the waking state. Those of you who joined us during the group med, we are now about to start the second part with our wonderful guest today, Theo Burkhart, who is a Vedic meditation initiator and went away and spent 3 months to train. I've calculated that it's over 6,500 hours that people spend with the prerequisites and the amount of meditation and training to become teachers, which is why sometimes we're not too easy to find, but why we have a plethora of information to share. The majority of our training is us getting rid of our stress. So if you think we're a little wacky now, imagine what we would have been like if we didn't meditate. But Theo became very interested in Vedic astrology. If you have additional questions, please pop them in the chat. Is my mic muted now? No. Okay, look like I hit something. And so we're going to find out from Theo about his love of Vedic astrology and answer some questions. If you have some, please pop them in the chat. And so go ahead, tell us how you became interested in Vedic astrology first of all.
I think there was a combination of things that happened in a period of several months. And one of them started on initiator training with a little lecture that Tom gave. And Tom Knowles is my teacher, and we were discussing it was one of those lectures at the end where he was feeling very warmed up and giving us deep knowledge. And he said something about Jyotish that kind of got me thinking about it, because I had always been very cynical about astrology. I just thought it was stupid. I mean, it's just stupid. You know, you like open the newspaper and you find your sign and it says something that's so general that anybody could relate with it. And then people were like, ooh, I'm a Pisces. And I just thought that the whole thing was nonsense. But this thing that he had said kind of got me thinking, it just got the wheels turning. And then I met a Vedic astrologer in LA, and he did my chart, and it was like he had the cliff notes for my life. It was astounding. And I wouldn't have gone if it was just a Western astrologer, since there was such a thing as Vedic astrology, which I didn't know there was. And at that point, the Vedas had not let me down. So I was very curious of what that process of getting my chart read would be like. And I was first very excited and surprised to hear that I was a Scorpio and not a Leo. I was always told I was a Leo growing up, and I'm a Cancer in Vedic astrology, because they calculate charts differently. But the sun sign is tertiary. Really, rising sign is first, then moon. They're very close, rising and moon. You have to look at both. But I'm a Scorpio rising and Libra moon. I didn't know what that meant until he told me, and then it made a lot of sense. And he started saying things about my chart and my life, and I felt like he was in my head, because he knew how I thought, how I operated, what happened, like certain points in he knew that I had a disease. He didn't know what disease, but he said, you got a debilitating disease right around this time. What was it? And I said, it was Lyme disease. And then he said, here's another thing. He said, one of your best friends is going to try and steal something of yours that you made, some artistic thing. And I said, would a screenplay count? And he said, yeah. And I said, but he said he didn't do it. He almost did it. And I was like, yeah. And he said, it's not over yet. In 3 years, the whole thing is going to circle back, which it did. So I was very curious of how it worked, because I said, how are you doing this? Like, how do you see this? And he says, well, this is a science. Very matter of fact, this is a science. And to me, I always thought it was mood-makey, witchcrafty, stupid. I had no respect for astrology. And that reading gave me some respect. And then I started to connect the dots of what Tom talked about in IT about Jyotish. And suddenly I was like, I picked up a book about it because I wanted to read more, and I couldn't make any sense of it. I read it for 4 years, and after reading it and always picking it up and leafing through it, 4 years later, I still wasn't any further in understanding any of it. It was so complex. But a story started to form in my head, because I'm a screenwriter, about astrologers in India, and the story kind of it kind of got rolling like a story almost never does. I've written several scripts, and I come up against walls all the time, but this thing just started unspooling. And the thing that I was missing was my knowledge of Jyotish, because it's about very good astrologers, ancient astrologers in India. So suddenly I had some research to do. That research inspired me. I started to learn how it worked. My respect for it became, I just have a lot of reverence for it. And then I think it was like in June of 2018, things started to click in a way that I could look at a chart and start to really understand it. And then I got really excited. And then I flew to Ecuador to study with Blaine Watson. I flew to India to study with Anand Malhotra, and the book started to make sense. And I just started understanding it. I'm still a beginner, but in our community, out of the initiators, I'm probably the most advanced. But if you put me in a room with actual astrologers, I would probably be the water boy, the canteen boy. To you guys, I think, because there's so much to learn that I know how much I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But like in our class, it must seem that I know quite a bit, but it really is just this. It's just the surface. I've heard a couple like career astrologers say it takes several lifetimes to learn this, to really master it. So you got to come back and again to really get it. So now I just love it. I just think it's fantastic, and I like and I really like stalking people because I'm a Scorpio. And this is a way of doing that without, having restraining orders put out on you or something. You can just ask them their birth details, and then they're an open book.
So it's not too uncommon nowadays for people who are aware of, in Western astrology, you've got to look at your sun, moon, and rising, which now makes it a little bit easier with the transition of Vedic astrology, because some astrologers in the Western actually go by your rising as well, rather than your sun sign. So in Vedic astrology, there's actually you can get a very specific birth time. And why don't we just go over why that is so imperative? And if you can do this, give a little bit of a reason, because it's a science that I recently got mine redone down to the second, and how you always encourage people to have that happen.
So there's something called the Mahadasha system. They're planetary cycles. And we can think of them as seasons of karma, or seasons of our life. So we know all about seasons, there's, especially if you live somewhere like not in Hawaii, but but we watch enough. Even if you did, you can watch enough Charlie Brown to know that it's winter somewhere. So you get winter, spring, summer, fall, and they're cyclical. Now, this is true for us as well. In our lifetime, there are 9 planetary cycles that you can go through. Sun, Moon, Mars, Rahu, Ketu, Mercury, Venus, Saturn, Jupiter. Did I leave anything out? Maybe. I don't know. But these cycles, when they and they're in a specific sequence, and the entire cycle of all the planetary cycles, think of them as seasons. Everyone is currently in one of these dashas, or one of these seasons. And that whole sequence is 120 years. So if you live 120 years, you'll go through the entire thing. Very few people do that. But you're born in a specific season, depending on where your moon is at the exact time of birth. And that moon, depending on there's 27 nakshatras, or constellations, that surround the zodiac, clumps of little stars. And we're not talking about the signs where there's where you can it's like connect the dots and you get a centaur with shooting a bow or something like that. These are tiny constellations, and they have names. There's 27 of them, and everybody, when they were born, their moon was in one of those nakshatras. And each nakshatra has an owner, owned by one of the planets. For instance, when I was born on July 22nd in 1969, my moon was in the nakshatra of Swati. And Swati has its own characteristics, and it's owned by Rahu. Rahu is a shadow planet. He's in eclipse. And just grab it.
Oh.
So at that moment, since Rahu owns it, it starts you off in your Rahu cycle. Other people are born in their Jupiter cycle, or Ketu, or Mercury. But that moment, depending on where the moon is in the nakshatra, because there's different parts, or padas, will place you at a very specific moment in your first dasha. So not everyone starts in it doesn't go in the same order. We can think of it like a circle. And what's that, like roulette? It's kind of like roulette, except the ball is the moon, and you just throw it in, it goes, and then connects with one. That's where you are. But then once we know the sequence, because that sequence is always 120 years, we can see, once we understand where someone's planets are, what is going to happen to them, where they came from, where they're going. Will they get married? Will they be rich? Will they have kids? Will they go to jail? Will they be destitute for the first 30 years of their lives and then become a billionaire overnight? Will they get bit by a snake? Will they get rammed by a cow? Will they meet, divorce, like marry, divorce, meet, and then die and then come back to life? I mean, everything is there. And you can see, depending on where the planets are and what signs and what house, this is how we read it.
Now, it seems like that is, fate. This is what's going to have happen. However, from my knowledge, depending on our free will and choice, we can be in certain situations. And if everything, again, the basis of the charts for those who are Vedic meditators, people join in, is really for the Jyotish to look at to how we can become more enlightened, right? How can we take these opportunities while we're here living this thing called life and, maybe make, lemonade out of lemons, as it were. And so people who are meditators actually start to get rid of their stress quite quickly. And so reactions will less likely come from a fight or flight response. And if you see someone's chart, let's say there seems a very dodgy period of life, right? You might get you'll look at something and say, oh, that looks like confinement, right? But there could be various options. It could be confinement in jail, confinement in, I don't know, studying, or confinement in, I don't know, an ashram, right? Depending on choice. So if these things are set out, how is it beneficial for a individual, even if they're not a Vedic meditator, to be aware of their chart?
I don't think it would be very beneficial. I don't see how it'd be very beneficial for someone to know about their chart if they weren't on some kind of path. And most people, a lot of, I think, astrologers probably get sick of, like, when am I going to find the love of my life? Like, a lot of people who don't meditate, who come to astrology, are really trying to find happiness outside themselves first. Once we have a meditator sitting in front of us and we're doing the chart of a meditator, things change a little bit. And the chart, we start to see it in a different way. You can hold something. It's how if you look at a statue, the perspective changes the look of it. And when I have a meditator sitting in front of me, the chart is different. It's in the chart, there's a house of natural law. And the main purpose of the chart, or I should say maybe the best purpose of it, because you can use a car for anything. You can use it as a hair dryer if you wanted. You get in with wet head and then, like, drive around with your head outside the window. It'll dry your hair, but it's not really the best use of a car, is it? And
as you can see, I don't use a hair dryer at all.
So with Jyotish, the best use of it is for spiritual progress. It's how to manage your karma, it's really a high grade weather report, and the weather being our karma or periods of our life, and how to, once we know that, is there ways to interact with the laws of nature? Are there ways to, and there are, by the way. In other words, there's remedies and cures built into the chart, always when we see danger ahead. And we always say, this is one of the purposes of Jyotish, is to avert the danger that has not yet come. And you can look at someone's chart and say, I think you better go to the hospital, actually, and have them do a scan on your lungs or whatever, depending on how good the Jyotish is. So it can be done for a lot of things, but I don't really want to do anyone's chart unless they're a meditator. And the other thing is that the person itself is kind of the yantra into the chart. So it's very difficult for me to do charts. Like, I prep charts. When people do a reading with me, I'll spend a lot of time looking at their chart, but it doesn't come to life until I see the person in person or on FaceTime, then suddenly I get a better view because I need that person's energy or whatever to get into the chart, and then it starts to unfold. And that's always amazing because I honestly don't think I know anything about astrology until I'm doing a chart. Even when I'm prepping the chart, I think, what am I doing? I don't know. I don't know any of this. I've been studying this for years and I still don't know anything. Then the person gets online, they're like, hi, and suddenly I see one thing maybe that makes sense, and that leads to something else, and suddenly it just opens like a flower, and I begin to understand what the chart is in this person. It's fascinating. It's great.
Well, I will share a little bit for those who are still a little unsure of how it can help. When I went through my Vedic astrology chart, and I'm still getting to learn it day by day, there were things that I've always been maybe a little concerned about myself with, that when it broke down with certain specifics, it became clearer that that was right there in the snapshot of when I came out the chute. And one of them I actually did in the class with Teo. And it's a certain combination when I researched it, which means I'm likely to say something in a setting which is highly astute and really quite on point that will make people's eyebrows raise. And I am also very likely to say something quite borderline ridiculous, as if someone has never spent any time studying the subject at all in the same period of time. And my experience as a student, and even my experience now with any voice work I do, I'm always waiting for that shoe to drop. I'm always waiting for that thing that I'm going to say that people would have gone, oh, she's got something to say, to be like. And I realized that I was carrying this stress around in classes or in a work environment because I was always trying to hold on and edit. Is this going to be the thing that I say that people really think that I am crazy or I haven't been listening the whole time? And I had one of those moments in your class. I do remember there was one you were like, oh, that's good. And the next thing that came out of my mouth, I was like, that was the most... and I saw your face be like, why did she say that? Like, what? And it was...
I don't remember.
You won't, because it's not that significant to you, but to me. So it's healing. When I say it's actually quite healing, because I find out what is in my nature versus what I'm supposed to be to conform to society. Right.
Yeah.
And it actually has freed up so much of, when I look at my rising is, Aquarius. Nowhere near would I've ever thought that. Now in Western astrology, my rising is Pisces, and I'm a sort of cusper, for the Leo Virgo area, right? But it makes so much more sense with the global mindset that I've always had, and I've traveled around the world a lot. And here with Aware Meditation, I don't think locally, I think globally, which has also for me been a communication challenge, because I don't necessarily think like most people do, because I have a global outlook. But suddenly I start getting around other people. Oh, that's why. Is a sense of healing and deeper understanding. I always knew that about myself.
Yeah,
but
it's very validating.
That's right. It is. So if you need some validation, don't worry about posting a hot picture of yourself online. Just get your chart done. Now, let's get down to some really nitty-gritty.
Okay.
Have you ever seen anything in someone's chart that you cannot tell them about because it would be detrimental?
No. There are combinations of there's yoga. We call them yogas, and yogas are planetary combinations, and everybody has many yogas in their chart, and they have a range of it just depending on. There's so many of them. It would take years to just learn them all. But I see yogas where it might say, "Oh, this person might commit a murder, or this person might lose a baby, or things like that." But generally speaking, like the people who get in front of me, if they have the murder yoga, for instance, they have enough to offset it, especially if they're a meditator. You're like, this is not gonna, it's the yoga's there, but it's being overpowered by all these other yogas. So you have to look at all these yogas and then think which direction are things leaning. There's something called Kalsarpa yoga, which is a really interesting yoga. If you see a chart and you have all the houses like around like this, and then all the planets, but if all the planets are contained within Rahu and Ketu, and nothing is in between or on the other side, but they're inside, that means they're inside the snake. They're inside the serpent of Rahu and Ketu. And that's called Kalsarpa. And if it's a true Kalsarpa, that person will be destitute for their entire life. They'll never get out of homelessness. They will be penniless. They will have, we're talking penury, disease, desperation, destitution, all of this. And I've seen lots of people who have Kalsarpa, but it's so easily canceled because some of these yogas get canceled by other yogas. So Blaine said something funny. Blaine is my teacher. He said something funny once that's very true, that you will, if you're an astrologer, you will never see an active Kalsarpa yoga ever in your entire career, because those people can't afford an astrologer.
Right.
So anyone who's going to come to a reading, if they have Kalsarpa, you already know it's canceled. It's just a matter of finding how. So there, I haven't seen anything yet, but I'm new here. I'm the new kid on the block. But I know that like Blaine had a great story where he got a chart. There was a phone call, and he opened up the chart and looked at it, and he said, his first thing out of his mouth was, how many people have you killed? And the voice on the other line said, about 13 to 15 people. And he said, are you calling me from jail? And he said, yes, I am. So very interesting. You can see these things. I know astrologers who have clients in the mob, and they call up to see when they're going to jail. It's a very interesting path, because one second you're talking to, a 26-year-old woman who wants to get married, and the next thing you got an axe murderer on the line, and after that you got the Godfather asking when he should skip down, and then the next person shows up, and that person it's their last life, and they're headed towards enlightenment. So you can tell quite a bit, but I find it useful for two reasons. One, very validating, especially if you feel like you have foibles, quirks, things that are maybe you've been struggling with in your life. Suddenly you look at the chart and you realize, in a sense, you're choiceless. In a sense, it was never going to be any other way. That's pretty cool to understand that this was going to happen no matter what. And if you also understand that the Jyotish perspective is nothing happens to you, everything happens for you. So yeah, I had Lyme disease. Yes, it showed up in my chart. But without that, I would never have been a teacher. I would not be talking to you right now. It just steered me in a different direction. There was no lesson to learn. It was more that it just changed the direction of my life. And that's a good thing. And that's a very sixth house thing, by the way. A gain from a loss. Because the sixth house is a house of loss, but in those losses come benefits and gains. In growth.
For those of you who are just tuning in and don't know too much, there are 12 houses, and there are the 12 signs of the zodiac. With that's what he's referencing as well. And right before we wrap it up, there is a big difference with Vedic astrology, and that it doesn't include Uranus, right, or Neptune or Pluto.
I would say Uranus. Are we?
I care more about the sustainability of the YouTube channel for global awareness, which is a nice lead into. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't, to help us build up the channel and reach out to people. But go ahead, take that. And let's talk about the couple of planets that are not included and the two that are in Vedic astrology that's different.
Well, we don't have to talk about Neptune and Uranus. We can just talk about Rahu and Ketu. And they're the shadow planets, and they're eclipses. They're the shadow of that falls over the moon, and the shadow that falls over the sun. And these eclipses, they're actually mathematical points in the sky where there's a crossover of orbital paths, and they create so much friction that they're like a consciousness. And they're both very different. Rahu is very outward, and since he's the head of the serpent, he has no tail. I don't think we have time to go into that myth, but he's just a head, and that means he'll never be nourished. He eats, he wants, desires, and eats, but what he's putting in can't nourish him because he doesn't have a body. Then you have Ketu, the tail, who's very inward and governs detachment because he is he's detached from the head. And he's a moksha karka. He's one of the givers of enlightenment, and he governs intuition, among other things. Like a snake on the ground will feel the vibration before hearing anything. And Ketu is very much like that. So those Rahu and Ketu are I think there are Western counterparts to that. But
we have Neptune, right? They use
No. It wouldn't be. It'd be like Chiron or something like that.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. Well, I think Chiron is like the Saturn sort of element of the grind and awakening. I do have one question that came, if it's okay.
Yeah.
And the question is, does the chart change based on when it's prepared? Like if someone was 20 versus 40, or is it always the same?
It's always the same because we're always looking at the natal chart. And that natal chart, if you have a correct birth time, a reliable birth time, that chart is fixed. And then from that, we can start to unwind your life starting from that moment of birth, because we'll know where the moon was, which nakshatra it was in, and then unfolds the story of your life, going from wherever you started, from maybe in a Mercury cycle to Ketu, and so on and so on and so on. And the way we would look at that is, let's say you're in a Mercury cycle, and Mercury is in the 9th house, but owns the 6th house and the 8th house. Then we know that in your Mercury cycle, whatever is in those 3 houses will be featured in this cycle. And we'd have to say, well, is Mercury placed well? Is he in the sign of a friend's house, or is he exalted or debilitated? But that's kind of how we do it. We look where it is, and then we see what's featured in those houses, and we start to get a story of what's going to happen, where you're going to go. There's all these rules too, but that's how it begins.
Exactly. And the other element when we wrap it up is that when they read the chart, they are able to map through the cycles which he talked about, the moon or the sun cycle, Rahu, Ketu. For example, I think Rahu is 18 years. So for 18 years, you're under the influence of that, and then that moves through. So you can get it up to date with where you are right now in your life, right? And what influences are happening. But it's all based off of that one moment when you come out the chute. And if you ever have any questions about, was that a real birth time? In the United Kingdom, we don't have our birth times written on our birth certificate. And so we will put the contact information of Blaine, where you can answer a slew of questions. And he will do his best to pinpoint exactly. And that will give more specificity, because it goes up to D9 charts, as it were, as it becomes
and
very
beyond.
Oh, no.
And beyond. There's D9 is you're not even halfway there. There's so many divisional charts. Yeah.
So those of you who have additional questions, let me know. We will reference them through to Teo. His information will be in the description. We want to thank you for joining us. You'll see in the corner over here is the image of Vedic meditation stories. The link for that, it's again free right now on Amazon if you have unlimited Kindle. And the number of pages you go through, Amazon looks at that and gives the nonprofit credit at the end of the year. And that all goes to help get things moving for the large group teachings that now COVID is opening. I had my first CEO presentation on Friday, and they are all on board in Los Angeles in the area of Boyle Heights, which those of you who don't know is predominantly lower income and some gang-infested areas. We're going to go in and get some people some meditation before the end of the year. Thank you for joining us. We have all the information in the chat, and please subscribe and join us for our regular cosmic chats that we have released a few days a week. You can check them out. They are mind-bending questions for people who are answering what is their perception of life, giving a nice inward look at maybe some non-meditators and some meditators, and you'll see how their lives changed. So with that, we will say Jai Gurudev, bye-bye. Thank you for joining us, and have a beautiful end of June.
Jai Gurudev.